The main girl slowly opened her eyes, waking up from a sweet, chill dream, and let out a quiet breath through her nose. She was shook to feel totally different, sensing the soft, almost airy feather bed beneath her back. Feeling the weird tight dress on her body and spotting a purple canopy in front of her, the blonde girl jumped up. Trying to figure out where she was and what the heck was going on, she looked around the bedroom, completely unknown but hella fancy. The girl slowly got up, using her hands to pull down her poofy dress. The heroine caught the reflection of a beautiful lady in the mirror. She even paused to check herself out a bit longer, smiling as she placed her palm on her cheek. The pink-eyed girl squealed with a grin that this stranger was mad gorgeous. But then suddenly she repeated the exact same move behind her, realizing it was her own reflection. The blonde woman froze in shock, realizing this wasn't her usual look at all. In her past life, the heroine was just a regular girl who spent way too much time grinding on a popular game. So deep into the plot of this sick simulator, she didn't even notice the red light flashing on the traffic signal, warning her she couldn't go this flying truck heading straight for her. She had zero time to stop. She kept running forward, just blasting the horn hard a few times. The brown-haired girl only had time to turn around and let out a quiet sigh. Like in slow-mo, then her short life got brutally cut short by a massive machine's terrible hit. Remembering that universe, that reality, and her sad fate, the girl froze and bowed her head. Realizing what was really happening, she ran her fingers over someone else's waist and noticed this figure was curvy with boobs that felt not just strange but kind of familiar. The blonde woman knew this bright, sexy image way too well, so she freaked out, clearly piecing everything together in her head. The girl slowly realized she'd been reborn. And her new life was that of a side character in the most popular game, a dope and interesting simulator. About love blossoming in the Demon Academy's garden mixed with tough quests and mad complications, all teens knew the main character. According to youth pop culture classics, all kinds of fan favorites were irrationally but madly in love with him. The girl couldn't even imagine her life wouldn't just end in an accident, but would turn out so different from her old basic familiar one. She got straight up horrified, thinking that the one she was reborn into wasn't even the hardest obstacle the main character faced on his journey. She skillfully blocked him from getting close to his favorites, pulling all kinds of dirty tricks, but she was a noblewoman. From one of the most noble houses in the whole empire according to the game's complex plot, Garnet North was the daughter and heir of a super noble family. But a wicked, aggressive side heroine, her character struck fear and annoyed not just all the other story characters, but also the players themselves, who couldn't stand the moments this character popped up. The noble felt hella lonely because everyone was glued to the main character, not even thinking about shifting the spotlight. The OG Garnet was meant to die at the hands of the final boss everyone fought around halfway through the game. The goal of this popular simulator was to build a romantic relationship with a male character. And you had to play as the main character. She was a low-ranked demon who, despite her status, knew how to use light magic, which was rare in the demon magic world. She also got into the top demon school where the king's own son studied, the biggest boss of all rulers, a slim, majestic redhead with broad shoulders and mad handsome. There were struggles along the way, but some fan favorites always popped up depending on your choices. And Garnet's comments and even her thought process intimidated the girl with skill and finesse. But she always crushed every challenge thanks to her kindness and positive vibe. The game also included leveling up through combat. And the ending depended on the main character's final stats that had to be leveled up throughout the game. At the climax of the whole love story, there was a brutal battle with the main boss that a lot of players couldn't beat. Even after multiple tries because of the difficulty and lack of strength as the long but dope plot moved forward and unfolded, the main character gradually woke up the mysterious powers inside. In the final battle, as usual, they got help from the main love interest chosen during the simulator, with the highest affection points to beat the final boss and save the demon world from destruction. That was the main goal of the game that millions of players worldwide chased eagerly. Garnet North's death was easily overlooked in the original simulator plot. No one remembered her until the game's end, of course. There was a super happy ending for the main character and their main love interest after all that. The blonde girl thought fearfully that at the end of her new life, inevitable death was waiting in the middle of the unfolding plot. Her pink eyes shimmered with salty tears as she whispered that doing nothing definitely wouldn't lead to anything good. Just bad consequences. Clenching her fists, the girl thought that knowing the game and the plot, the characters and their fates would help her change the destiny of her main rival while saving her own life at the same time. The action of this popular love game took place in the state of magical creatures, the demons in their powerful empire covering vast lands. Initially, before the countdown of years began, it was ruled by a single demon lord. But after a while, the whole way of life gradually changed. Then the power started to be in the hands of the 4 heavenly demon kings, who led the strongest and most famous aristocratic houses. Besides the powerful high-ranking demons, there were also weak low-tier demons whose lives went in a completely different way and barely envied Garnet despite her high aristocratic status. She was on the level of the low demons and only used weak magic. Magical skills could open any path. But because of her skills, all the aristocrats and family laughed at her, even the servants' maids, gardeners and laundresses who worked in her father's mansion secretly and sometimes openly mocked the girl. One day, the boldest of all the maids even pushed Garnet down the steps of a tall staircase, running fast toward her, and without even giving her a chance to escape. The girl was fully aware of that incident, and remembered that this fall clearly happened before the rebirth, and she even lost consciousness. The blonde regretted that until she recovered her memory, she practically knew nothing about the original North and the kind of life she lived. The only fact known to her, and apparently generally known throughout the Demon Empire, was her terrible and frankly unbearable character. It was totally normal for the girl to make false accusations against all the servants, framing them, manipulating others, and forcing them to endure punishments. She always enjoyed the fact that she caused trouble for everyone, both the common servants and the highest-ranking aristocrats. Garnet spent a lot of time in bad and reckless company, always getting involved in stuff that was almost criminal. Her interests were limited to brand new items, expensive jewelry, and lots of cash. North liked casino games, betting, and similar activities that weren't fit for a noblewoman status. And she couldn't care less about morality. The blonde woman was way too generous and even careless. She wasted her money without mercy, spending it recklessly, although, of course, she never earned money herself. Even those maids who were supposed to take care of and protect her often acted like her haters, as if she wasn't even a person. Despite fulfilling their basic duties, they had no intention of following etiquette or decency toward the princess. One day a maid poured a sweet sticky drink from a big teapot right over Garnet's head, staining her perfectly clean hair and expensive dress. North screamed in surprise and anger, feeling completely soaked with the sticky drink. Luckily, it had already cooled down, and the woman didn't even try to hide her emotions. Smiling with fake innocence, she honestly claimed her hand just slipped and said she was really sorry. The girl was totally sure that from now on she wouldn't act as stupidly as the real Garnet did. The memories finally came back to her, and now she was going to shut everyone around her down with serious rejection and pure rage. Repeating this thought in her head, North suddenly jumped and shoved the maid away, screaming mad after that humiliation. Garnet kicked hard, yelled loud, and declared that next time they'd better think twice before messing with the lady with those ideas. The maid found herself sitting dizzy on the floor, and a second maid ran over and sat beside her, scared but hyped to help. Even though North was weak in magic for all demons, this character's physical traits were insanely high. The second maid, with zero guilt, suddenly told her lady this was disgusting and way too dangerous, and crossed every line of allowed behavior. She added that the chance of someone like Garnet becoming the future head of the North family was straight up unthinkable. North froze in shock, not understanding how they could say such words to the lady, considering they were just servants and nothing more. Then, hearing a tired, irritated, overweight male voice calling her name from behind, the blonde girl immediately turned around. Standing in front of her was the fourth celestial king of the North Lantana North, who was also the girl's dad, having put up with her antics almost since she was born. Garnet stopped and called out to him, wanting to spill everything ASAP about what happened and reveal the full truth about the rude maid's behavior. The girl's pink eyes widened, and a bright, peaceful smile spread across her face, thinking she'd definitely be saved from this nasty situation now. Turning and placing her hand on her dad's chest to get his attention, the blonde asked him to listen, and started telling the story about the maids. The man suddenly clicked his tongue in irritation, snatched her hand off sharply, and asked why she was making such a big deal out of nothing again. The girl froze, feeling all calm and joy instantly drained from her soul because of her dad's unexpected words. Like dumping a bucket of ice water on you, if you think about it. The dad was always cold to his daughter because she only caused him problems and headaches of every kind. The maids weren't in a rush to leave. They stayed close and listened with obvious interest, while Garnet desperately begged her dad to hear her out again and again. Suddenly, one of them yelled loudly that the young lady hit her in the face for no reason, just like that, hard and painful, because she was in a bad mood. The blonde declared desperately that those words were nothing but lies, and actually she had been poured a drink straight from a porcelain teapot. The man cut her off harshly, and immediately ordered his only daughter to shut up, then called her the family's biggest and most unforgettable disgrace. Garnet asked him to clear up the misunderstanding, but the king dismissed it, saying he was tired of false excuses. The maids waited until the ruler got a bit distracted, then snickered quietly and disgustingly. Not even hiding their lies. Nobody believed them, but the reason was only their own actions and choices. The girl herself had previously thought of North as just a low-tier villain, and an annoying rival to the main character. With a sigh, the dad told the heir that even he was running out of patience now. Garnet felt tears in her eyes when he said she should leave her inheritance to someone else. The blonde whispered, asking who that would be, and the king sighed, annoyed, closing his eyes. This man was now in the factory and research center zone, serving as the young director of the Royal Magic Research Institute. The draconian Lillian, another candidate, was Lillian the monster hunter's younger brother. Dark-haired Iris. Later, Garnet reflected on the fact that everything happening could turn into a nightmare for her. Her father's behavior and words, tired of his only son's antics, were clear as day, and his subsequent actions were clear too. Only here, as the daughter of the fourth celestial king, she was losing all chances of a chill, peaceful life. Later, two already known brothers visited the royal palace for an audience with the known ruler. Addressing his brother, the blonde guy said someone recently hit him up to talk about an interesting topic. Lillian was 15, so her position as head of the institute surprised those unaware of her skills. Iris, who was 14 and preferred monster hunting over science, asked what was up. The guy replied it was about the royal inheritance, and the dark-haired one muttered that the ruler was persistent. Lillian wondered with a smile if the current heir was really that mediocre, and said it was super unlucky. The younger brother replied he didn't see anything unfortunate about it because the older brother wanted to take the celestial king's spot, and that was an advantage for him. A few days later, Garnet was chilling in her cozy room reading a book lying on a soft bed and slowly swinging her legs. She laid on her back and thought the new successor her dad picked as heir would arrive today at the estate. Looking up, the girl decided she needed to be more worthy than those people the king called, to somehow rise in his eyes. The blonde took her time and dressed carefully, putting on her full dress that delicately mixed pink with thick black. Garnet looked down the spacious hallway, which was completely empty, and walked calmly forward, wanting to get her plan going ASAP. Soon she leaned on the slightly open door of one of the high-ceilinged meeting rooms where she immediately saw the right people in front of her dad, the Celestial King. Two young men were sitting, and everyone was chatting with interest about various topics. Laughter and smiles, carefully but quickly backing her back against the door so they wouldn't see her. Garnet was surprised she hadn't immediately remembered these two. After thinking a bit at that moment, the blonde realized these two were possible love interests of the main character from the original plot. In her memories, images definitely appeared of two demon brothers, with interesting hair in different shades of blue, who weren't the last heroes in the game. The main character could only seduce one male character, making him her favorite, but there was also a hidden spot more. These two young men were brothers, #01 to each other, and also held high-ranking demon spots in the upper class. Lillian, the older of the two brothers, first appeared in the story as a true genius, the youngest director of the Royal Research Institute. All her achievements were just impossible to count and remember because she even became a billionaire. Despite her very young age, the younger brother, dark-haired Iris, wasn't lacking in talents either, but wasn't a scientist. Instead, he was an excellent hunter of a wide variety of monsters. In the future, according to the game plot, he was supposed to become relatively quickly the leader of his unit under the Demon Lord's command. The young men got along since childhood and throughout their lives, were close in the game and often walked side by side, spending lots of time together. Garnet thought with horror she'd never be able to pull off something like that in her life. To get past both and earn her dad, the Celestial King's trust, she heard creaks and then sighed loudly, displeased, and asked her daughter why she was there calling her. After that, North, terribly nervous and worried in front of these young men, entered the room and sat with her dad, finding herself right in front of the two demon brothers. She trembled uncomfortably with fear, but tried to hide it, clutching the skirt of her gala dress, as the king introduced his daughter, Garnet North. Both guys immediately looked at her with an interest that was borderline straight-up disrespect. Surprised by her bluntness, the blonde thought both were super hot and that there was no way they'd ever be into anything she had to offer. Especially not her. The girl could guess a lot, but never that her dad would name anyone other than his lazy daughter Garnet as heir. Suddenly remembered that as the original game's plot moved forward, the brothers were pretty tight with her during the events that went down. North and Lillian were in different years at Demon Academy, and it was weird for a minor character to interact with a favorite, but it happened. The older brother suddenly snapped her out of her thoughts and said with a smile he was really glad to finally meet the girl, pressing his hand against his chest. The young guy politely introduced himself by name, then pointed to his younger brother, naming him and introducing him too to the high-ranking folks, saying he'd heard a lot about the girl. The blonde thought for sure none of it was good, neither in high society nor low. Garnet clearly understood their opinion of her, was already set and unsatisfactory, and it needed to be changed ASAP by any means. She clenched her fists, trying to psych herself up to only say stuff that wouldn't make those smart demons think she was dumb. The princess exhaled, looked up and said she was also delighted to meet them, then introduced herself. Again to her guests by name, using her knowledge of the original game, the girl said she'd heard about Lillian's new magical developments in various scientific and research fields. Their shaky, just-started convo was interrupted by the Celestial King's butler, who gently knocked on the open door. The man waited until everyone paid attention, then turned to the monarch, reminding him it was time to handle other important business. The ruler murmured back, "That time flies so fast you might not even notice," and stood up, clenching his fists, turning to look at his daughter, and guests apologized for leaving and explained he now had to go. Garnet, panicking, thought that despite all the stuff affecting domestic and foreign policy, her dad just couldn't leave her alone here mentally, but screaming inside real loud. The blonde desperately thought she was dumb and had literally nothing to talk about with those guys. An awkward silence took over the room after the king left, and the brothers calmly poured tea. Not really caring about what was going on, North was scared to say a word. Not wanting to sound dumb or like an ungrateful, rude rich girl, Lillian suddenly broke the awkward silence and admitted that honestly she was kinda jealous of the girl in some ways. The blonde froze in surprise, not getting who could be jealous of the failed heir's disappointing situation. The young guy explained that she was the daughter of one of the Celestial Kings, but grew up to become that person, mumbling he wasn't talking about her in a good way. Garnet seemed to feel the effects of his demon magic on herself and exhaled embarrassed. Unsure if those insults were meant for her or not, she thought she heard Lillian's calm words, but couldn't believe he'd say that stuff out loud and fearless about the ruler's daughter. The girl shifted her gaze to Iris, who had apparently been watching her closely all along. Not really hiding it, she immediately changed her expression and sadly asked what Garnet wanted from him. And behind him on his shoulder, a threatening white tiger suddenly appeared like his alter ego. The dark-haired guy put down the now empty cup on the saucer, his hands looking way too rough and strong for such fragile dishes. The hunter stood up abruptly and quickly from his seat, smoothing out his expensive dark blue jacket and his perfectly clean white lapels. Opening the door, Iris said it was better if the girl didn't look at him like that, meaning she shouldn't stare. Opening the door, Iris said it was better if the girl didn't stare like that, basically not to keep her eyes locked on him, muttering that she was the one bothering him. North froze in surprise with her hands up. She didn't expect that behavior because even if people didn't like him, they tried to hide it behind fake smiles. Lillian also got up from the couch side and said that from that day on, the two of them were officially her siblings. She added sarcastically, "Nah, it's not true now. He also has a shot at taking the 4th spot." Celestial King, the Garnet eyes widened in surprise when the young man, without hiding his intentions at all, declared he'd kick her out the door the moment he got the chance. When she was left alone in the room, Lillian's insolent words still echoed in her head. There was just no way she could be allowed to get what she wanted. After those statements, growling with indignation and anger, North mentally shouted that those siblings were a damn piece of shit and that she'd never give them the heir spot she held herself. Later, back in her room, the blonde reasoned that these two were clearly the worst picks for any love line development. Unlike Garnet herself, the main character had a super soft and way too sweet personality. And that was their main difference. Lillian now seemed like a total demon even though she stood out for her good manners, which made her seem pretty fake. Iris, the youngest but boldest, didn't even hide her intentions toward the king's heir, whom she seemed to hate with all her soul, pounding on the bed. The blonde thought, annoyed, that she felt way better with the hype during the game in that past life. Today was supposed to be the usual monthly family gathering, super painful just for Garnet. She was constantly criticized and even openly insulted by other family members and distant relatives. Then they just went on about the dirt on all kinds of people. The girl realized with horror that today, besides her evil and jealous relatives, Iris and Lillian would also be there as new heirs, and that was just brutal. Before the memories came back, she was way happier sleeping peacefully through all those meetings, not even thinking about being nervous or worried. The demon world was originally split into 5 major territories, each ruled by different celestial kings. The capital, the empire's main city, was under the rule of the most powerful demon lord, so that city always thrived. The Demon Academy was in southern city, a beautiful coastal region with constant sunshine and warm winds. To the east there was a city surrounded by deciduous forests, where nature and its care meant a lot to the locals. The arid western city sat in the desert, surrounded by stunning oases that didn't soften the sandstorm's effects. Finally, under the northern celestial king's control, was the mountainous region, the most scientifically advanced industrial research area. The Garnet family ruled the northern region, full of workshops and institutes, and the city was boldly compared to the empire's capital. The king always backed scientific progress and defended the state's culture, even at great cost, taking on a heavy burden. Soon the relatives started gathering at the ruler's palace in various carriages, which they left in the mansion's spacious courtyard for the meeting. Noble couples, young and not so young, as well as singles, were already in the halls, actively discussing news, gossip, and rumors that everyone cared about. Now Garnet was sitting next to her dad at the head of a long, wide wooden table, while people gathered in the room and greeted each other. The girl nervously thought she was about to face a dangerous encounter for her, which gave her slight nausea and an unpleasant chill inside even before the meeting officially started. People openly and fearlessly discussed how glad they were that the king was disappointed with his heir, calling him useless. They said the ruler had officially adopted possible heirs already, and that Garnet couldn't be the potential head of the family at all. The long table filled with rumors before hot dishes, and that Garnet couldn't possibly be the potential head of the family. The long table buzzed with rumors before the hot dishes arrived. Lots of snacks and a wide variety of drinks for the usual meal. The king finally stood up from his seat and announced that his big news was to discuss the role and fate of the next state heir. He said only a worthy candidate could hold the title of celestial ruler, and many, maybe all, already knew about the replacement that had happened. The family smiled as they were introduced to 2 new candidates, promising for the role of head of the family, aka the next ruler. Many present immediately started asking about Garnet's fate, the new heir's plan, moves, and more. The king sighed patiently and said there were more contenders every time, and some were convinced they had equal rights to the throne as the heirs. The man loudly declared that in a month a serious magic tournament would be prepared and held to decide the future successor. The long, gloomy meeting ended soon, and all the family members quickly started to scatter, leaving the spacious hall and chatting about what happened. Garnet was still shook by what she heard from all sides and just stayed silent, bowing her head and sighing miserably in silence. Her dad noticed this and casually told his daughter that if Lillian and Iris win, she'd instantly lose her status as heir, seeing her daughter's face change even more. The man tried to calm her down, saying thanks to the tournament rules, all participants, including her, would have a chance to win. The blonde girl clearly realized it was unlikely she could stand up to such strong demons. She'd be at a serious disadvantage. Lillian, still there, said with a wide smile that her skills were clearly not on the same level, and Garnet would definitely have it tougher than everyone else. The girl thought angrily and annoyed that this dude was talking like she'd already lost the competition, even though it hadn't started yet. North recognized her new sibling's superiority, and after some events, gave up trying to reclaim her previously lost positions. Iris immediately declared with mad confidence that she didn't even need to join the tournament because she wouldn't win anyway and would just waste her energy. Lillian listened closely to her little brother's words but then chuckled calmly, knowing appearances can be deceiving. Hope for possible backup in this showdown appeared and shone bright in the girl's soul, but the blonde man immediately said he also trusted the outcome and added that once he became Celestial King, he'd demand the money wasted on her back and invest it in developing many institutions. Iris, thinking about possible outcomes after winning the tournament, said she'd sell her old weapons, buy new ones, and develop the city guard. The siblings laughed quietly in unison while watching the Celestial King's enthusiastic and clearly approving reaction. And their only daughter's nervous mischief. Garnet thought angrily and annoyed that she wouldn't be able to put up with all these idiots for that long, even at the cost of crazy effort and self-control training. Screaming mad inside, the girl firmly decided she'd have time to get into shape, and definitely wouldn't forgive any of them in the competition. She stood up and very politely asked if she could join this interesting convo too, where before she'd spoken in third person. The young ones were a bit surprised and went silent, hearing that the current heir, who wasn't in the best spot, also wanted to speak. North said when she wins the magic tournament, both brothers would bite their tongues and open their eyes, because they never expected the girl to show her teeth like that. The blonde added that both pissed her off too much with their words, and now she'd take this competition way more seriously. Later, the princess walked down the hall thinking that after this convo ended, where she even decided to threaten retaliation, she actually felt way better. She thought hard if she could level up. Just like the main character in the original simulator plot, her level up in the game started with being able to beat different low-level monsters living in the forest outside the capital, Garnet. She wondered if the same completely simple and logical strategy would work with her qualities and stats that needed development. Suddenly, a chubby unknown dude snapped her out of her thoughts and immediately asked if the next meeting had turned into a total disaster. North froze in surprise, realizing she didn't remember at all who this person was from the simulator events, even though she knew all the characters. The girl wasn't sure if that blonde guy was related to her or just some bad company she used to hang with in her free time. Suddenly, he added with confidence and a mocking tone that Garnet didn't stand a single chance against those two, so there was no need to stress about the tournament's outcome. Garnet's jaw dropped when the guy said if she had nowhere to go, he'd take her as his life partner and that he'd only be happy with that result. After that, the blonde girl got even more hyped to win, even with her super low skills, just to avoid all this madness, and although it took serious effort, she didn't want to give up her spot to anyone, much less marry some random stranger. So far, she could only use weak electric magic like to paralyze an enemy. But that could also turn into a super useful skill once she realized that paralysis combined with physical strength could be her win. North smiled brightly. Seeing the advantages even if they were weak later, the girl worked hard on her development in the dense, leafy forest right behind the capital's Magic Institute, walking tiredly down the path. Barely dragging her feet one after another, Garnet muttered she had to walk way too much to get here. She immediately convinced herself that if this place was part of the game, then she could find plenty of easy opponents here. To level up her stats and levels by killing creatures like small metal slimes with weird shapes, you could get quite a few points. She also hunted agile miniature gray mice, and by beating them in the game, they rewarded you with mochi cakes that gave a special boost seeing these funny creatures live. The blonde girl remembered with interest how hyped she used to be playing the simulator. Not wanting to leave it, she leveled up the main character because it was impossible to reach the point of fighting the main and most powerful final bosses without small villains. The win over the metal slime gave her the chance to earn lots of specialized experience points, and the girl skillfully took advantage of it. In a past life, she did this all the time because it was the fastest way to level up. And so she knew all the ins and outs of this interesting house. They ran super fast and were hard to kill in one hit, due to their high resistance to almost any physical damage, but you could destroy the little mouse to get the magic mochi, which also had beneficial properties when leveling up this lower tier of animals. Was usually left alone, but Garnet decided to cheat a bit and use it as a slime trap quickly and with extreme persistence. She attacked several mice and then confirmed her earlier theory by immediately executing a totally logical plan. Having gotten several of the useful mochi, she smiled, realizing that if she got the slime, it wouldn't be able to move for a while, and that would guarantee her the win. There was also a pretty rare deadly candy, a high-class item that dramatically boosted normal attacks several times after chewing it. North remembered there were also items that increased critical hit chance to almost 100%. This clever and thoughtful way she could beat this little monster. Even if her magic was super weak, the one mochi helped the girl skillfully, even if just for a bit, but still. It robbed her opponents of the chance to move at least somewhat. None of the living beings in the simulator could withstand a physical hit like the one Garnet had. She smiled brightly and rolled up the sleeves of her dark outfit in a triumphant gesture when her quest finally gave the first but pretty tangible results, dealing with the slick metal slimes over and over again. The blonde paused a bit and exhaled loudly, fighting off attack fatigue, wiping the cold sweat that had formed on her forehead with the back of her hand. The girl wondered how far she had leveled up her skills. Magic, to her surprise and disappointment, was still pretty low, while the stats average for common demons ranged between 20 and 50 from that point on. Garnet realized that to boost her magic levels, she needed to hunt non-stop without even taking time to rest. Sleep, travel to the forest, and come back. The girl tirelessly started dedicating literally all her time to capturing and destroying low-level monsters obsessed with the need to win the next tournament, even sleeping in the cold, dark forest. Snug inside a sleeping bag, she dragged relentlessly on her back so she wouldn't get distracted in the end. The forest was completely stripped of the old abundance of metal slimes after her crushing, almost non-stop grind. Stepping forward, the blonde, tired but in a good way, murmured that it took way longer than she thought. Garnet finally headed into the city, stretching her shoulders that were stiff and tight from constant stress but trained, and looking at the usually noisy capital's streets. Clearly North had to get her act together for tournament day. Ditching the worn-out look because her battle suit had lost all decent appearance, all her clothes were irreparably damaged, and for the competition she needed to find new clothes ASAP that were easy to move in. Without restricting her moves, the blonde girl scanned endless boutique and store windows, which only had dresses and nothing suitable. Turning around, the blonde got distracted when she heard a strange noise, and then saw a crowd gathered in the central plaza already familiar to her. An unpleasant blonde man shouted hysterically that all his clothes were ruined and asked what he was supposed to do now, roughly grabbing a woman by her fragile wrist. He asked what that disgusting behavior was and how she dared to lift her breaker. Garnet looked around and realized a small kid had accidentally stained the formidable man. Or rather, his obviously expensive jacket with ice cream. She clearly remembered he'd been at a previous family gathering and had interacted very weirdly with her after hinting at a possible spouse connection. The nobleman shouted loudly and threateningly again that he was a direct relative of the Celestial King and wouldn't let such things slide without proper punishment. The fat man waved his huge hand forcefully at the scared woman who could only wait for what would happen next. Garnet only had time to exhale and quickly and sharply ran forward and shoved her unpleasant acquaintance, making him stagger involuntarily and stop. She immediately shouted, ordering him to cut this out right now, and pushed him hard straight into his fat stomach, moving him away from innocent people. The blonde man screamed painfully, slamming his back against the wall behind him, which literally crumbled from the sudden hard collision with such a mass. The onlookers, both nobles and commoners, whispered quietly but not too secretly that this strange brave girl's clothes were super torn and dirty. Blushing intensely with embarrassment after everything they'd heard, Garnet turned to the watchers, and suddenly they were shocked to recognize her as the true daughter of the Celestial King. None of those present could understand what was going on, because just a bit earlier North had been just as arrogant and usually took full advantage of her position. Now suddenly she was defending strangers from her own high-ranking relative in a way totally out of character, and that was wild. From his own high-ranking relative in a way totally out of character, and that was wild. Staring at the man already lying on the stone street floor after a heavy hit, the blonde thought she'd gone too hard with the hit and maybe should have been a bit more careful. North desperately wondered what to do next, and decided the best move now was to bounce fast somewhere far from here. The mom and son she saved, who came from a simple, unprotected village, were still super scared, but definitely they'd remember this savior girl forever. As she bounced off the main street, Garnet sighed, thinking about how everything that happened was straight up awkward and now public knowledge. She spotted a random clothing store tucked in a plain alley and decided to step in, hoping to find something that fit her vibe. Right at the door, she was greeted by some unusual and super interesting models that didn't look like the usual fashion market stuff. The blonde smiled, thinking she didn't expect to find such a dope boutique in a chill corner that could actually surprise her with what they sold. The dark-haired girl working there came up to the customer, hyped to say hi, and asked if she needed help picking out an outfit. Garnet quickly explained she needed clothes that wouldn't hold her back because her current comfy fit kept getting wrecked. It was like the store owner had been waiting for this moment her whole life. She smiled wide and immediately bounced off somewhere, barely jogging back with heavy hangers holding two cool, different options. The girl asked if the customer liked the clothes while checking out the many pieces that clearly matched her taste. North asked who made these fits, and the dark-haired girl proudly said they were her own designs. After trying on both sets and rocking the second one, the Celestial King's heir confidently declared that everything fit perfectly and she was buying every single outfit offered. She left the store with a huge round white box tied with a big bow, packing all her new gear. The blonde thought it was a major hassle carrying such a heavy shopping box, since she was now taxiless after a long forest hunt. Those who saw her earlier at the plaza during the weird incident were shook, seeing such a drastic glow-up in the princess's look, who'd turned into the definition of elegance. They wondered which obviously luxury brand store Garnet had hit up for such a big haul. Since they'd already dipped from the main boutique squad, they figured despite her tough vibe, Lady North knew fashion and style like a boss, so they had to hit that store ASAP. The young nobles quickly circled up, buzzing about the need to get there fast, or else all the outfits would be snatched before they even showed up. At the same time, a scruffy dude with a thinning goatee and a long dark cloak was walking toward the blonde. He took a few steps but suddenly tripped and fell, slamming his palm hard enough to bleed Garnet. She spun around from the hit and saw the stranger looked seriously hurt, and probably in mad pain, so he needed help. Squatting next to him, North asked, hyped, if the fallen man was okay, trying to gauge the damage. She dropped the heavy box on the stone floor and pulled a fresh white handkerchief from her backgammon pocket, ready to help, surprising the stranger with her caring move. The noble skillfully wrapped his injured hand from the fall with her fancy cloth, not holding back at all, still squatting in front of him. The blonde smiled warmly and assured the stranger everything was going to be totally fine now. Recognizing the girl as the heir of one of the Celestial Kings, the man was shocked. She gave him such an expensive handkerchief and even bandaged his wound. Madame Garnet, who had already quickly handled her business, didn't act at all like the noble and commoner rumors and gossip said about her. Later, when it was already night, the carriage arrived at the imperial castle, its wheels creaking under the pink and sparkling sunset reflections falling to the ground, holding the grocery box in her hands. North sighed chill, whispering that she was finally home after all that grind. Training and home, she reminded herself the magic tournament was tomorrow and she needed to snag that W by any means necessary. The sun was already dipping behind the horizon, and the blonde made sure to push her limits hard but still keep her own interests locked down. Tournament day arrived and a whole crowd nobles, merchants, plebs plus warriors packed the Colosseum, specially decked out for fights. Fighters of all kinds and magic styles were already roaming the roomy locker room, sitting at tables gearing up for a quick brawl. Garnet was stressing about what was next, clutching her skirt nervously. Luckily, it wasn't one of those typical fancy dresses, worn by the highest noble ladies. The familiar demon brothers rolled up to her, and when Lillian asked with a smirk if she really showed up, both were oozing confidence. Right away, they added it had been a minute since they saw North, who was apparently prepping for today. Sarcastically hyping their fear of the showdown, Iris calmly said if a nobody like her came to this tourney, despite the obvious outcome, it'd still be mad respectable, shaking with rage and irritation. The blonde thought furiously that after all the bullying, she'd make these damn idiots regret every word. Lillian sighed, wishing her luck, and Iris confidently said with all her effort she wouldn't even make it past round 1. As the battles kicked off, the young fighters were already talking trash, saying it'd be way too easy and that the real hype would be them facing off in the finals later today. Clenching and unclenching her fists with burning annoyance, Garnet mentally dubbed them her ugly bros, ready to school them fast. Any demon who wanted could join the magic tournament. Hosted by her dad's status, rank, or social standing didn't matter. North feared, as expected, tons would come to fight for the Celestial King spot, so her chances of winning were hard to gauge. Not far off was a burly blonde dude, who spotted the heir princess and immediately called her name, asking for her attention. The familiar name Bob threatened that yesterday the girl made a bad call, just slamming him against the wall. Garnet smiled nervously and groaned inside, thinking she still managed to spot him in the crowd, and didn't get a head injury, which honestly would have helped. Bob said he's still a pretty understanding and chill guy, so he's cutting the girl some slack because there was a mix-up between him and that dumb pleb. The blonde girl's mouth dropped, feeling a wave of disgust when the greasy smiling man asked if she was actually jealous of him. After a short, pointless back and forth, Bob told Garnet not to sweat it because he's really into dirty girls like her. The dude didn't stop there, saying if he wins today and becomes head of the family, he'd shower the girl with love and care. Sometime after this unwanted encounter, the referee dropped a loud, dramatic speech to kick off round 1 of the magic tournament. In the first battle, per the draw results, Garnet had to fight that same arrogant Bob who kept throwing shade with nasty comments. The girl listened quietly and sharp, noting the enemy considered defeated if they surrendered or physically couldn't fight anymore. The chubby man with a nasty grin said he'd be super careful not to hurt his beloved girl's body. Patting her shoulder with his huge hand, Bob declared the girl could just give up without fighting to save energy on a pointless battle. The blonde stepped back, horrified, clearly realizing she had to beat her relative at all costs to avoid that mess. The referee raised his hand and then shouted that the magic tournament was officially starting, slamming it down hard. Immediately backing off and letting them clash in battle, Bob instantly attacked with full force, raising his fist and wildly swinging at Garnet, fueled by a fierce explosion of his energy. The girl rushed to the side, shouting loud as she dodged flying rocks of all sizes that could have seriously hurt her. When Bob asked if she was giving up, the blonde spun around and yelled mad that she'd never be his babe, that she'd never let that happen, standing her ground with zero plans to end this fight, much less quit so fast and take insults like that. Lillian and Iris, both watching the first fight with interest, looked surprised by how things went down. Underestimating the heir to the throne, the dark-haired guy asked thoughtfully if that was all there was, because he expected her to fold from fear of others' magic even before the fight started. His older bro smirked, knowing Bob could make anyone lose it in battle, so you shouldn't judge the outcome so quick. Iris crossed her arms, shrugged, and said it didn't matter who won, she'd face him next round, so she'd just wait, chill and indifferent, straight up saying she didn't care. Who'd come out on top this round? Not even North. Bob said he wouldn't even let Garnet get sarcastic with him, that she had no shot against him, 'cause she couldn't even use magic. The fat dude added that a rebellious chick like her deserved way harsher punishment than he thought. Against all odds, when magic grabbed his hands for the next powerful, even crushing blow, North charged hard at him using his more developed physical powers. The princess pushed off the stone platform and jumped high, dodging skillfully, leaving Bob frozen in shock. Shaking his head in all directions, Bob yelled, confused, wondering how she got so far. Finding herself right behind him after a perfect jump, the girl skillfully aimed her magic powers at the fat relative, summoning lightning that hit him hard. The man screamed in pain with his mouth wide open, then felt his whole body start to go numb. Garnet suddenly remembered she still had some electric magic that could paralyze any enemy. North immediately added that if she landed a solid hit on the enemy, he wouldn't be able to move a finger at will. Hands on hips, he triumphantly announced it looked like he dodged the worst fate of becoming his babe. The referee sat next to Bob, who couldn't get up, and loudly shouted that Lady Garnet won the first fight of the magic tournament. The demon siblings Iris and Lillian were shocked seeing the scene, 'cause they definitely didn't expect that outcome. The regular crowd also yelled, expressing surprise and chatting about such an unexpected but dope show to watch, clearing his throat and hiding his feelings behind a mask of indifference again. The dark-haired man said seriously and calmly that fools just get lucky. He immediately told his older bro he was gonna get ready for his fight, and got up from his seat, heading to the fighter's locker room, sitting in the stands and steadying her breath. Garnet thought she'd won the first fight and the next one would be tougher, but she could handle it. The blonde watched closely as the battle started and listened to everything going on among the crowd, watching the fights. Iris's fans, girls screaming loud, holding signs and posters in their hands, shouting that today he looked as handsome as always. The young guy stepped out fearless and calm to fight a muscular dude barely dressed. Wearing a horned helmet, Garnet wondered how strong Iris could be if he was loved so much. 'Cause she'd only heard about his endless wins before the referee raised his hand standing between the two fighters, and shouted they could start the fight, lowering his palm and stepping back toward the edge of the stone platform. Using earth magic, the opponent yelled out loud and wild that he would definitely become the next celestial king. After his victory in this tournament, Iris walked past the man with ease and indifference, saying his words were pretty funny. Entertaining and super interesting, the dark-haired guy said he only joined this magic competition because he'd eventually have to fight his brother. Suddenly he struck the enemy with the deafening force of a blazing red flame. Iris threatened, ordering him not to even think about interfering with him in this. The fire he possessed, a scorching, crushing, infernal force, erupted beyond the Colosseum, making the crowd shake with fear and awe. The dark-haired guy blew out the flame in his palm, stepped forward and confidently declared that the battle was over and everything going on was just boring. The referee raised his hand with a bright smile and admitted that Mr. Iris had won this round unconditionally. Covering her face with her hands, Garnet thought in horror that this kind of combat magic didn't just scare her, it straight up terrified her. She waited for the other fights to finish in the locker room, wondering how the fight would end and what she'd be capable of. Not too surprised, the blonde girl first heard screams and shouts, then the referee's notification that Mr. Lillian had won the third fight. A bit later, when the semifinals started, Iris came out to face her, not even doubting himself or his success. The dark-haired guy looked calm, even a little bored. With a smile, he advised the girl to at least try to entertain him a bit. Clenching her fists, Garnet thought she wouldn't let him be so cocky and treat her like some weakling anymore. The referee hyped up all the spectators who couldn't get enough of the epic fights and announced the start of the match between Mrs. North and Mr. Iris. The dark-haired guy's fans kept screaming, welcoming their idol, while the blonde woman said with a wide smile that from what she'd seen he was getting more and more popular in these circles. Making a finger gesture to the girl, Iris said he didn't care at all, and called the girl closer, calling her a bitch, knowing it would hurt her. Garnet thought angrily about how much the guy annoyed her with his confident attitude and behavior, hitting him as hard as she could. She unleashed all the electric magic energy she had and yelled at him angrily, but the dark-haired guy, without much effort or fear, just stepped aside, dodging the blow like it was a warm breeze. Garnet opened her eyes, confused, thinking her magic attack hadn't worked at all. Iris patted her shoulder with his palm and said he was hoping for at least some interesting moves in this battle, but apparently he was wrong. Despite leveling up in the minor beast's house, North's magic powers still weren't a match for the others. Before the magic tournament started, she did everything she could and then some, but apparently it wasn't enough to win. The only thing that really changed significantly was her speed, though it only affected her reflexes. Iris easily dodged the electric magic attacks because they had short range and quickly dissipated in the air. Garnet had absolutely nothing to lose, so she rushed forward and decided to act completely different than before. She thought at least the paralyzing magic should have some effect on her relentless enemy. The blonde clenched her fingers, feeling energy surge through her body, and summoned electricity, moving quickly toward him. North gathered absolutely everything she had in this desperate strike and shouted, wanting to at least trap him in this attack. The girl barely caught Iris, because he dodged easily again, stepping to the side and apparently continuing to mock her. The dark-haired guy looked at his rival with even a hint of surprise, raising an eyebrow, but quickly composed himself. He thought with a bright smile that he was on the edge of failure, but now his whole plan seemed to have worked, and even way more than he wanted. Iris clearly noticed her excitement and lit a bright flame in the palm of his hand with a laugh. Whispering that things were getting way more interesting, Garnet screamed in horror as she realized she couldn't do a damn thing against him in the battle, standing right in front of the young guy. The girl understood why he looked so happy, thinking hysterically about what she should do next, a clear fear showing on her face. The princess even went way paler than usual. Iris seemed crazier than before. Giving in to the thrill of the fight he was leading and had no plans to back down, he pushed off the ground hard and charged forward. Abruptly, he wasn't about to back down to the girl staring at her beautiful face with wild, feverish eyes. Completely surrounded by fire, Iris declared that if the tricks were done now, it was Sel's turn. Garnet screamed in fear, realizing there was no way she could block this attack with her weak magic energy. The dark-haired guy ran at her without stopping, fire blazing stronger and stronger in his hand. Wanting to face the enemy head-on, she ran screaming across the stone platform, careful not to burn any of her precious parts out of fear. A bright fire hit the stone platform and luckily didn't reach the girl, instantly turning into a column of gray smoke. Sitting on the edge of the platform, the blonde girl was breathing hard after dodging that attack and thinking desperately about how not just to survive but to win in this uneven fight. She realized clearly and plainly there was no way to stop the young guy from landing that same powerful fire strike again. That maybe one day she wouldn't be able to dodge it. Garnet knew perfectly well that if she kept hesitating she wouldn't just lose, but also get hurt, and she needed to get close to him without getting caught in the flames. The girl looked around and stared at the cracked ground of the battle platform after the fire, then stopped because she had an idea. Iris, ready to score another win, was already winding up for the next hit, and with a smile asked why she stopped so suddenly. The guy ran away from the fire again, continuing his mouse-like sprint, feeling his thin skin start to burn from the insanely hot air. As the flames turned into gray smoke that made her eyes water, the blonde was breathing hard. Recovering from her next run, she wanted to hit Iris with her strongest evasive move, and he fired up from the fight. Fell for a similar bait, attacking and yelling she had no choice. It was time to use the only plan. If she'd come up with a bit earlier, Garnet decided to block the next attack the only way possible, and she dropped to one knee, pounding the stone floor with her fists as hard as she could. Because of the damage, the hard dusty platform not only cracked, but a huge chunk even flew up, covering the guy from the crazy fire blast. Iris froze in surprise for a moment, realizing she literally had made a shield for herself out of the platform debris without using any weapons. The young guy got distracted immediately and realized he couldn't see where she'd gone, seeing nothing behind the gray smoke and dust. The dark-haired guy realized too late that Garnet had already climbed up quick and slick behind his back to attack. She gathered her strength and hit him with her magic, and although it wasn't super crushing, it was surprisingly sharp and piercing. Iris froze, her eyes wide, as her whole body slowly trembled and started to lose feeling. The fighter collapsed to the ground, cursing, totally unable to get up because she'd lost the ability to move. The guy was breathing hard, standing next to the freshly defeated Iris, apparently unable to believe his win. The referee, who'd hidden during the fierce attacks to avoid getting burned, peeked out and announced the lovers' victory. The spectators, all without exception, nobles and commoners alike, demons tall and short, gasped in shock, whispering and exchanging looks. Lillian sat in her seat while everyone else stood up from the stands, shouting in surprise, smiling. Garnet thought she'd pulled it off because Iris had underestimated her and her skills, later meeting Lillian in the locker room. When he stepped forward with his arms crossed over his chest, the girl noticed his furrowed brow and responded the same way, because honestly she was just defending herself in the fight. They passed each other without a word, but they already knew what events would link them soon. Entering the buffet, Garnet realized she might face Lillian in the next battle. The girl grabbed some food, thinking she should study her future opponent's fighting style. The blonde walked back to the competition room, thinking about the house where the fight was about to start, crossed the threshold and froze. Hearing everyone's cheers and the referee announcing Mr. Lillian as the winner, frozen with fear, Garnet was shocked to realize the battle had ended even before it began. During the break, silence ruled the room, and people got caught up in their own stuff. North even forgot how worried she was and happily chowed down on a hot dog. The crowd was hyped, saying Mr. Lillian was sick and could end any battle instantly, no cap. The girl's jaw dropped when she heard the young man's flame was somehow unusual. He controlled it effortlessly. The blonde thought Lillian and Iris were alike since both used fire magic. She wanted to keep eating chill, but then she heard whispers and rumors about herself. A girl said Mrs. Garnet had zero chance of winning and laughed. Garnet froze, with a pissed-off look and her appetite totally wrecked. Soon the referee happily announced the final. A battle between Mr. Lillian and Mrs. Garnet. The rivals stared with so much tension and irritation it was like a lightning bolt crackling between them. Even before the clash started, the young man confidently claimed his magic, which was pretty basic, had primitively destroyed the whole arena before. The blonde snapped back that he could say whatever nasty stuff he wanted. But a win's a win no matter how. The slightly surprised referee, whose words went unheard by the fiery finalists, repeated himself loudly, yelling that the battle was starting. The guy ducked behind the railing of the single-jump platform, having learned from Princess Garnet's past destructive fights, thinking he hadn't seen Lillian's fighting style and all his fights happened in a flash. He guessed this battle might be like the last one. When the boy slowly reached out to attack, the blonde froze and widened her eyes as a bright blue flame shot toward her. North sprinted forward as fast as she could, screaming in fear at the swift, sharp attack from her opponent, who was better than her in literally every way. Looking around, the girl started breathing hard, unable to grasp what just happened and why. Looking ahead, she saw a bright blue flame that was just as hot as normal. Lillian was shocked the girl dodged it, because he made the flame as smooth and invisible as possible. Garnet exhaled and stoically out loud declared only pathetic cowards attack from behind. The young man reminded the princess of her recent words, saying a win's a win, and so it was. At the same time, the arena kept glowing with a blue flame that didn't die down or fade at all. Lillian said he didn't want to see her lose disgracefully, but couldn't help it. The guy added with extreme indifference that even if the princess played fair, she couldn't beat him. The blonde froze as the blazing blue flames blocked all her escape routes with a solid will to win. Garnet thought she had to clear the way no matter what. She slammed the platform floor hard again, gathering all her physical strength to help. The ground beneath them exploded and shattered from the attack, but Lillian effortlessly rose into the air. The young man murmured something with slight but well-hidden surprise, showing he didn't get what was going down. The referee grabbed his head and yanked his dark hair, yelling loudly, "High-key, all that was just straight up terrible." Both opponents froze midair, clearly ready to keep the fight going. Even after all the destruction, Garnet gathered all her magical power into her fist to strike her opponent. Looking determined, Lillian boosted the flame multiple times, saying the trick she pulled with Iris wouldn't fly here at all. Feeling the heat hit her face and body again, the princess clicked her tongue, realizing her older brother was way stronger than her younger brother, and while she was whining, the guy was already close. Whispering in the princess's ear that she was slow with no time to fully dodge the flame, Garnet screamed loud as hell. Feeling that hellish heat, the girl screamed when Lillian said she originally wanted to fight with weapons instead of magic. The dude immediately added that this was banned, so she was at a slight disadvantage. While fighting on this ground after the attack, Garnet thought Lillian must be messing with her because she was the only one struggling. Blue Eyes said she put up an anti-magic barrier before the fight, so nothing worked. The blonde thought desperately that this guy had taken every precaution against her. She figured physical strength would only get her close to the enemy as fast as possible. The girl clenched her fists, thinking there was no clause in the tournament rules. That victory had to be purely magical thanks to her training. Garnet boosted her physical attack level, but not magic. North decided to ditch her weak energy completely and just push her physical strength, throwing heavy rocks at Lillian. Mumbling that this way she'd have better chances, a bit surprised, the blue-eyed girl skillfully dodged every possible hit, frowning because the princess still dared to attack. Moving forward determined, the blonde knew this battle would be tough for her, but she'd manage. Lillian suddenly realized her rival was slowly wiping out her magic with physical attacks. Wiping out her magic, she smashed the ground again, breaking it, and seemed to be getting a taste for this kind of fight. The referee screamed scared, thinking these two could just demolish the unlucky platform Garnet was on. She charged forward furiously with fists out, seriously thinking about winning this fight. The referee hid and sat on the floor, ears back and screaming, anticipating the girl's heavy attack. Lillian thought, confused, that she usually defended with a weapon but now couldn't use it. Blue Eyes shook her head, thinking she was shocked that a demon with such insane physical strength actually existed when looking at the stern Mrs. North. The guy mentally concluded he'd been way too careless before the fight, but the electricity magic slipped from the blonde's hands as she lunged at the young man for a desperate hit. The crowd watching the fight screamed, surprised, unable to hide their reactions to everything going down. The girl angrily thought she wouldn't let anyone take away her chill aristocrat life. Hitting Lillian the blonde was sure she'd never lose her title and end up on the streets. The king and his servants watched everything from their fancy box sitting on the throne. He wasn't just surprised, but legit shocked his daughter was already in her third arena fight. Garnet froze, breathing hard, trying to pull herself together when her opponent finally sat down on her knees. Lillian didn't look defeated at all, but wasn't in a rush to get up, smiling and shaking her head. The young man suddenly smiled warmly, like he'd just scored a win, and looked up, calmly declaring he was surrendering. The princess, still standing in front of him, froze with wide eyes in shock, and her jaw dropped. She couldn't hide her expression when Lillian added that if the princess kept going, she'd just be wasting her energy. The guy said with a chill laugh that the decision to beat him using only physical attacks was super entertaining and interesting. Lillian stretched with a smile, shaking his hand in a classy move. Clearly familiar with her aristocratic nature, and congratulated Madame Garnet on her official victory, the blonde froze, and was sure that if it went on a bit longer, she'd definitely pass out from how wild things were getting. The referee made sure no more stones flew her way, then stood up and loudly declared that the knight had surrendered, and that the princess was the winner. The demons from both lower and upper ranks started whispering in shock. Some couldn't even hide their screams of surprise and disappointment. The young fans of Lillian openly sobbed, covering their faces with their hands because their idol couldn't become the next celestial king. While the rivals still faced each other, everyone wondered how the lady who couldn't use magic would be the future ruler after her father. Garnet lowered her teary gaze as she clearly heard that someone so arrogant and terrible like her wasn't worthy of becoming the heir of the mountain region. The celestial king, who entered the ruined arena, ordered everyone to be quiet, and asked his daughter to come to him. The blonde girl, feeling the exhaustion from all the battles, obediently approached him with her head down, not wanting to hear any more of these nasty words. The man said he wouldn't break his word, so his only daughter would remain the future heir because she won the tournament. The minister shouted that there was no way they'd accept Garnet as the future ruler, and today she had definitely tricked and fooled them all somehow. Bob, who couldn't believe what was happening and had steam coming out of his ears, started feeling the rage and yelled that it was true, staring blankly. The blonde silently reflected on the fact that someone he definitely lost to her, honestly, because of his weakness. When Lillian heard from the crowd that someone wanted revenge for lies, he exhaled, irritated, and shouted loudly, ordering them to shut up. Scared by the fury of such a strong and influential demon, the people in the stands obediently fell silent and stopped suggesting new solutions to this situation. The young man said there was nothing worse than accusing a person of lying and cheating without any proof at all. Garnet looked surprised at the one who recently tried to corner her, and if not burn her, then hurt her with the bright curls of his blue flame. The blue-eyed guy put his hand on his chest and added that he did his best to win, but this battle showed he still wasn't ready to take on the role of head of the family. Climbing onto the platform toward his older brother, Iris put his hands in his pockets, expressing his agreement, and said he also lost with absolute honesty. The blonde blushed, not expecting at all the support from the one who recently had been making playful and sarcastic jokes about her and her skills. Asked a bit dumb, but with more affection, if she had already recovered from the battle, and the dark-haired guy looked at her silently. Both brothers looked at each other and even chuckled quietly when they saw her confused and even a little scared. That was the expression on poor Garnet's face. Addressing everyone present, Lillian, with a smile that wasn't even typical of him, asked everyone to just reread the magic tournament rules, immediately opening the booklet with the necessary list. Iris read aloud that whoever wins the tournament automatically becomes the heir of the mountain region. Blushing even more than before, the girl allowed herself to consider the idea that in the future she might even become friends with these two demon brothers. Among the crowd, clear discontent still reigned that none of the magic tournament guests thought to hide in front of their celestial king. Garnet desperately thought that having won, even though she had become head of the family, she had no idea what she'd do with those who were against her. Several officials, ministers, and mayors reflected on the young hothead's inability to become the next celestial king. One shouted that she was gifted with both beauty and mediocrity, and his interlocutor added that the tournament was started to deprive her of the chance to inherit. The man added that Lord Iris and Lillian would be perfect for the position, and the second said that relying only on Lady Garnet. The old gray-haired dude still holding a spot on the board just started nodding like it was pointless, saying there had to be someone better and more legit than her, but Bob insisted he was the most promising candidate of all, since he was a closer relative and could offer a bright future. The blonde, who honestly tried to secure her win, couldn't wrap her head around whether this fact really meant nothing to them and was left stunned. She clutched her chest, thinking everything was obvious from the jump because initially all her relatives were against the girl staying in the family. The buzz of the human swarm suddenly went dead silent when several blazing infernal flames hit the bottom of their stands. Snatching the fire from her hand and growling in irritation, Iris loudly ordered everyone present to finally get a grip and shut up. The dark-haired guy said they were just making noise, but now everyone had to face the truth because the old man was still right. The celestial king looked disgusted at the young guy calling him that but stayed quiet because he said anyone could claim the heir spot. Lillian confirmed everything was 100% legit and was sure Garnet didn't cheat during the fights held in the magic tournament, adding it'd be easy to understand if their brains had even a little bit of folds. Iris asked her brother if this kid was even capable of being sly. North still couldn't get how two evil brothers were suddenly trying to protect her and push their interests instead of their own. At the same time, Lillian said he was ready to handle all complaints personally, and Iris asked to leave it to him to warm up properly. The brothers looked so determined they unintentionally scared everyone present, who had loudly voiced their opinions and decisions before even the annoying Bob, still watching what was going down, clenched his teeth and fists, growling silently in outrage because he couldn't stand them. The king stepped forward and said he'd really been worried before that Garnet wouldn't handle the roles assigned to her. He added that's exactly why he adopted Iris and Lillian. But all his fears, as it's clear now, were totally pointless. The man said that unfortunately for many, his daughter, considered mediocre, won this magic tournament and proved otherwise. The king looked at all the unhappy people and said if they allowed such thoughts and words, he'd have to tell them everything going on. He said he'd been constantly watching his daughter's actions for a while to see if she was ready to stay in the family or not. The ruler said it might be hard to believe, but Garnet really has changed a lot this month. The blonde woman opened her eyes and looked surprised at her dad, and until recently she'd even refused to believe him. The king said to win the tournament, his daughter spent several days in the forest, training non-stop without rest and basically no sleep. Then, according to the monarch, after returning to the city, she freely helped residents who were in trouble. The ministers stayed silent as he said all this time Garnet behaved with dignity and beyond that, did everything she could to become a better person. Bob shouted she was an evil, selfish woman and he'd never believe she'd do anything good without benefiting herself. North smiled brightly, closed his eyes, and thought about how awful this guy would be if she became head of the family. The king's patience ran out fast, as he kept hearing insults toward his daughter from a careless relative. Suddenly, from somewhere under the stands, a young woman dressed simply came out with a child clinging tightly around her neck. She publicly declared that the words of the Northern King were absolutely true, and Lady Garnet really saved her and her son. The blonde remembered it was the same family Garnet saved in the city's central square from an angry Bob yelling something. The king froze in surprise when she told him she'd gotten lost in the city and gotten into trouble, from which the princess helped her get out. People heard that while she was in a tough spot. Everyone else just walked by, but the lady's move was straight up brave. Bob yelled again, asking how he had the nerve to open his mouth, insulting her and calling her just a dirty pleb. The scared woman hugged the kid close and shut her eyes when he shouted that he'd silence her for good now. Garnet was ready to bolt again, to save the poor stranger who now also spoke up to defend herself, no fear of the fallout. Lillian held Iris, who was rushing to help too, putting her hand out to stop him from making a rash move. Bob froze when the pleb shouted that the Lady North had protected her from this damn bastard, pointing right at him, threatening her with magic in front of everyone. The blonde asked what he had said, clearly trying to hurt the woman. Garnet watched everything going down, hyped, knowing she had to step in ASAP or things would get ugly. Suddenly, a girl walked through the crowd wearing a rare blue Levite dress, her dark hair shining gracefully down her back. The king growled annoyed, telling his relative to chill and stop embarrassing himself more than he already had. The blonde obediently stopped, hands still raised, fully aware he was powerless against the rules. At the same time, the girl confidently agreed with the decision to make Lady Garnet the future heir to the mountain region throne, explaining that before the princess visited her shop, it was on the brink of collapse, but now her business was truly saved. The blonde froze in disbelief, wondering what the hell this was all about, since she hadn't actually done anything to rescue anyone. The high society ladies whispered that the lady was basically advertising this clothing brand because she shopped there. Garnet listened, genuinely surprised, realizing she barely knew about the high-quality clothes made by the boutique owner's own hands before. She noticed she'd been walking around town carrying a box with a huge logo, and honestly, a lot of people just trusted her style sense. The brunette added that the lady generously bought tons of stuff at her store, and thanks to that, everything got a second wind. North's mouth dropped in surprise as the stranger kept describing her contribution and thanking her just for making a small purchase. Suddenly, a sharply dressed man stepped forward, his shirt collar spotless and almost shining eyes burning with determination. He said he also agreed with naming Lady Garnet the next Celestial King, because she helped him when he was hurt. The blonde girl suddenly remembered with surprise that this was the guy she'd seen that one time, leaving the boutique with a huge box. The girl recalled he was the one who had fallen right in front of her on the path. Sensing the vibe shift, the king stared at the man he'd known for ages. Since he was the prime minister of his state and meticulous at his job, Garnet raised her hands, shocked eyes wide, not understanding how all these things she barely noticed could actually help her. The man explained he liked to disguise himself and visit public places in low-key clothes, but the lady still wrapped his hand with an expensive handkerchief. The king thought the report said she helped an old man in town, but apparently the spies mixed up the prime minister with the old man. Garnet was the Celestial King's daughter, and had met this man several times before, but she didn't remember his face at all. The blonde wondered if she only remembered people she liked and those who showed interest in her. The man added that the girl's kindness was genuine, because he didn't look like a prime minister, just a regular guy to everyone else. The Celestial King turned and nodded, thanking the prime minister for his help, and he just smiled, even chuckling quietly at his expression. Doesn't matter who becomes the next Celestial King of the North, it'll still be one of the biggest calls for the entire demon empire. The father added that if Garnet did well in the tournament, then under her care the Northern Kingdom would definitely be safe. The man looked down and muttered, who still had some doubts about whether everything would be okay after his decision. Several ministers and deputies listened to the ruler, and everyone was nervous, unable to hide it because they couldn't stand his only daughter. The king said he wouldn't break his promise, so the title of the next Celestial King stays in the hands of the previous heir. Grant's pink-violet eyes opened wide and shone intensely upon hearing what he had been trying and fighting for so long. The people who believed in his arguments applauded, raised their hands, and shouted that people like Bob were out. Even Iris and Lillian were smiling, reacting to everything happening like they had just won this insane fight themselves. Garnet clenched her fists, trying to grasp the scale and meaning of the victory she had just scored. The girl blushed hard and even closed her eyes to hide the tears welling up in them from everyone present. The people gathered in the stands, whom she had unknowingly helped at various points in her life, watched the lady with joyful smiles. Bob almost exploded with overwhelming hatred, mentally cursing Garnet for jumping in, and thinking their showdown wasn't over that day. Later, the golden rays of the setting sun already lit up the Celestial King's estate, resting in peaceful silence under the warm wind. Lying on her soft, precious bed, the blonde enjoyed her rest, murmuring that she was insanely tired after everything she'd been through for a month. Her father's words still echoed in her temples as he confidently, even lazily, said he was giving this title to his daughter Garnet. Leaving himself an out, the man added that if the girl suddenly stops handling her powers, she'd lose her inheritance rights and it would pass to Liliana. Exhaling loudly, the princess thought with relief that luckily, she had managed to avoid a terrible event in the form of possible title deprivation. She looked out the window, thinking that even if she didn't want to be the next Celestial King, this was the best way to live a long life. Stroking her chin with her fingers, the blonde thought with satisfaction that after all she'd wiped the noses of all these upstarts with her own efforts. The girl suddenly lifted her gaze from her thoughts when someone knocked on her room's door, and looked that way in surprise. Garnet slipped on some soft black slippers and walked to the door, telling the arriving guest she was almost at the door. She let her visitor in and froze, eyes wide open in shock, mouth agape at who she saw standing in front of her. Lillian, smiling with arms crossed over her chest, looked super chill, like she hadn't just barged into someone else's bedroom without permission. Still unable to process, the blonde asked why she suddenly decided she could come here. She couldn't even imagine Lillian suddenly needing this, that suddenly he would come to her unannounced and uninvited, and at night no less. Laughing to herself at the princess's reaction, the blue-eyed guy told the girl not to freak out because he doesn't bite. He said he no longer wants to fight Garnet, and that North is a super interesting topic to study, and surprisingly he's pretty talented too, blushing a bit. The blonde thought it was hard to believe his wish to be friends after all those words about how he'd throw her under the bus in the future. The young man smiled and invited them from that moment on to forget all the beef between them and just be friends. Completely lost and biting the inside of her cheek, the heir to the throne thought she had a really bad feeling about this friendship. Lillian asked if he could come into the room, and the girl immediately said it wasn't a big deal, nicely asking Garnet not to overreact. The blonde guy passed by her and she screamed loud, already imagining how red she'd get from her own mess, clutching her chest. The young man said maybe they're not blood relatives, but he wants to be a good big brother to her. North frowned again, and bit his lips nervously, not even imagining how this could possibly work out. Such a close relationship between them when he said he wouldn't mind chatting. A bit while the princess thought about all the cosmetics and other junk scattered around her rooms, the blonde girl realized that no matter what kind of relationship they had, she still wouldn't want to show up looking like a ruthless person. Suddenly, she let out a loud, sharp scream, asking him to wait at least a minute and stay still so she could clean everything up real quick. Lillian watched with a smile as her official sister pulled out tons of books and scrolls from the bed, and at the same time put things back in place. She couldn't help but laugh quietly and kindly while watching her nervous antics and her desperate rush to clean up as fast as possible, continuing to sort through the scattered stuff. The girl blushed involuntarily, either from embarrassment or just from the act itself of talking to this dude. Later, when darkness slowly fell over the outer estate, they were already sitting down having tea, and Lillian said she wanted to talk about her father's request. The Celestial King said that he and his younger brother, Iris, would also live on this property, so now they're officially related to the ruler. The blonde woman's eyes widened in surprise, and her jaw dropped, not even imagining how she'd exist in the same building with both of them. She asked if he was sure about this, still trying to understand what caused such a drastic change in the two brothers' behavior, who also wanted to stay here. Lillian said that was exactly the case, and the girl let out a loud sigh, serving her companion another cup of hot herbal tea. Blue Eyes said that before being adopted, they sold their old house and spent most of that money on a ton of studies. Garnet looked at him with interest when the young man said living here with his younger brother and younger sister would be way more interesting. She was about to murmur that he'd really changed his mind about her when suddenly she heard another knock on the bedroom door. Raising a cup of hot tea and smiling sweetly, Lillian murmured that he'd arrived, even faster than he himself could have imagined, still without getting a response but already having entered the princess's chambers. The dark-haired man with a mischievous grin announced to his older brother that he'd arrived. Garnet froze in surprise, not knowing how to react to the hunter's shamelessness as he headed straight toward them to join the tea party. Iris approached the sofa where Lillian was sitting, leaned toward her older brother, and suddenly calmly asked him to wrap this up quickly, tapping the spot next to her. The blue-eyed man told her to take her time and sit down, while North wondered if they remembered that was his room alone. Looking at the sweets, the cups of hot drinks, and the teapot, the dark-haired guy asked, a bit annoyed, if they really decided to have tea without him. Placing another cup on a white saucer, the girl hurriedly replied that she'd also serve tea to Iris because she didn't know he'd also decide to visit her. The room immediately filled with the pleasant aroma of herbs brewed in a porcelain teapot. When the hot drink was in the cup, Lillian said that despite her position as the Celestial King's daughter, Garnet always makes tea for her and even serves it to others. Iris accepted the cup, while her brother added that normally ladies couldn't even do that without servants, and it seemed like the lady was fully taken care of by servants. After these flattering words, the princess involuntarily recalled her past life where she definitely didn't have a single servant helping her. If you put it in gaming context, she'd be a pleb who served the masters, but now she said she also knows how to make tea. The blonde woman said she usually eats alone, so she often handles these kinds of things herself, like buying sweets for tea in town, like cookies and mountain chocolate. Lillian said they seemed quick to believe the bad rumors about her, and then honestly admitted she was wrong about her. Garnet stroked her hand and thought that, purely theoretically, the previous rumors about her character and actions were absolutely true. While Iris poured sugar into the cup, the blue-eyed man said that now he was known as a magic researcher, and his brother as a monster hunter. North's eyes popped out of their sockets like literally about to fly off his head when the sugar cubes just lined up in a tall pile in the dark-haired guy's cup. When Lillian said they were just regular plebs, the princess remembered she'd read that info in the character's biotap. Then long ago, they were left alone as little kids in this dangerous, brutal world, but clearly they had zero plans to quit. The siblings spent mad time grinding on themselves, leveling up their talents in different areas, and slowly climbed up together from the bottom. Lillian explained with a soft smile that it was exactly because of her tough life story that she couldn't stand lazy, useless people. She added that's why she accepted the master's adoption offer, and at first she actually had this harsh plan to kick the girl out of the estate. Garnet looked at him with surprise and rage, like she suddenly remembered all the shady stuff, the hurtful, even downright evil things he'd said. After setting the cup on the saucer, Iris caught his reaction and quickly assured that now he and his big bro weren't about to pull that crap at all, adding she never thought a tiny thing like her could be so strong. Then thanked the girl for the sweets and tea, though Garnet wasn't totally buying it. She managed to shake off the bad vibe her brothers had already put on her in the original simulator storyline. Lillian and Iris also decided to instantly befriend the main character. Because of their unusual skills, the demon siblings treated the girl as friendly as they do North now, and that still made her think about what was going on, exhaling and feeling the heat on her cheeks. She thought that even if she wasn't the protagonist, they still chose to meet her halfway. Night gradually fell over the estate, while the new sister and her new big brother's tea party kept going with warm convo. The girl sat on a soft couch facing the guys, then stretched and asked if the two were heading out today. Lillian looked like he was thinking way too hard, humming and rubbing his chin with his fingers like he was trying to find some excuse. He said he wanted to go shopping because he was running low on materials for experiments, but he preferred going himself rather than sending his servants. Iris caught her brother's look and quickly said he also had to handle some important business, but it was a secret and he couldn't say more. The blonde felt it and advised them to get those things done before it got totally dark, thinking they'd be fine anyway. It seemed like after bonding with these interesting strong heroes, even the sky seemed to shine brighter for the heir to the throne. Finally, when night fell over the mountain region's capital, the two brothers set off to start their newly planned business. Guards stood near one of the many houses located on a quiet street, and surprisingly lights were on in the windows. In this building, Boyu, pissed off about what happened, gathered those willing to stir up some trouble for cash. Angry, he kicked the table and knocked it over. Cursing and asking how she could be the next celestial king of the north, the blonde guy shouted that he was way better than this fallen loose woman and declared he'd still prove his superiority to everyone. His nasty plan was to publicly disgrace the girl and strip her status so the North King would have no choice but to exile her. The people gathered with him listened with some surprise as Bob yelled that he'd then set up real torture for Garnet. Justifying himself, the man said he lost only to lower everyone's guard, but if you control the girl, she instantly becomes obedient. Having disgraced her in front of everyone, he wanted to make sure the princess got kicked out of the house and stripped of everything. Having dishonored her in front of everyone, he wanted to make sure the princess got kicked out of the house and stripped of everything, and then she'd have no choice but to stand up when a weird noise was heard outside the door, followed by a loud crash. One of the rebels stood up and asked what that could be. The door was ripped off its hinges and the room filled with the light of bright blue and scarlet flames mixed together, blasting heat. All the criminals screamed, and one of them said scared that everyone needed to get out ASAP to avoid getting hurt. Men in expensive uniforms stepped through the threshold, at the same time clearly set on disrupting the peace. From the quiet meeting, Lillian and Iris looked at the scared faces with a smile and then whispered between themselves. They were easily detected by a magical listening device, fully aware of who was coming for their souls. The criminals yelled loudly, clearly not even planning to fight because it was pointless. When the little bug flew away from Bob, Iris repeated that they found them thanks to this little thing their brother Lillian made. He explained with a smile that he made it just in case before the tournament and that it also has a tracking function. Super convenient, the dark-haired guy said. Since dealing with idiots like these was a regular thing, he had a bad feeling about some shady plans. And his brother replied that this was definitely noticed. Bob dropped to the ground and froze, terrified when the blue-eyed man said that they old plebs often had to get their hands dirty to survive, reminding him that after the tournament everyone's attitude toward Garnet changed, including him and his brother. But Boyu wasn't just mad, he was almost angrier than the rest. It was literally written all over his face that he was about to throw down, and immediately, as usual, they decided to find out exactly what it was. Iris said it was so easy it was almost funny, and if Bob was lucky, he might still be able to move after the talk and even show his real determination. Lillian added that it wasn't enough to dishonor someone in front of everyone because Garnet was basically just roasting him for his totally fair win. Flexing his arms, fists clenched, stretching his whole body, the dark-haired guy looked down on the man and called him an idiot. Lillian stood up, moving shoulder to shoulder toward her brother, asking with a wicked smile if they were ready to have some fun with their bros. Bob shouted that they were dirty upstarts dishonoring the aristocratic family and that right now he'd show them the power of a real noble. Both brothers, immediately embarrassed by his stupidity and narrow mind, lowered their heads, and Iris muttered that Bob was an idiot after all. The blonde decided to seize the moment and sneak attack the two brothers so they wouldn't have time to respond. Lillian and Iris turned around when they immediately felt different types of energy aimed to hurt and fight them. Pulling out a black whip, the blue-eyed man laughed and claimed that the tournament rules slightly limited his wrestling skills, but now those rules were gone. Both criminals immediately flew to the side, stunned by his unusual weapon that even managed to miss in a short time, pouring some kind of potion on the enemy. Lillian declared they couldn't be hurt and that this red brew would only cause a slight tingling sensation. Both criminals screamed, clutching their heads and the spots hit by the potion, yelling that it was super painful and they felt it all over their bodies. The blue-eyed guy chuckled softly and smiled.